All right, good day. My name is Berkenda. I'm the Vice President of Member Engagement and Operations here at Omnier Consortium. For those of you who are new to our story, Omnier is a leading industry association promoting interoperability and certification for ITS, tolling, and connected vehicles. With a population of over 1.4 billion people and a fast-growing transportation network, India is investing in C-V2X technologies to help make roads safer, improve mobility, and reduce traffic congestion. Today, you will learn about the latest developments in C-V2X standards, research, and deployment for India. Qualcomm's Jim Misener and Dr. Punit Rathod will share about India's impressive progress in deploying C-V2X technologies and will offer their unique technical analysis and market insights. Before I turn it over to Jim and Punit, I'd love to tell you a bit about each of them. Jim, Punit, can you join me on screen, please? This is the fun part for me. I get to talk about you both. All right, here we go. Jim Misener is Senior Director of Product Management and the Global V2X Ecosystem Lead for Qualcomm. He develops and executes C-V2X deployment strategy across all regions, working with automotive, road owner operator, and telecommunications partners to accomplish broad C-V2X deployment. Jim also develops IoT solutions for transportation markets. Previously at Qualcomm, Jim led the automotive standards team. Jim was a pioneer in vehicle highway automation and vehicle safety communication at the California Partners for Advanced Transit and Highways at UC Berkeley. He has served as the PATH Executive Director, Executive Advisor to Booz Allen Hamilton, and as an independent consultant. In these roles, Jim has experience and a reputation of delivering dozens of technology projects with a large-scale safety impact. In addition to his roles at Qualcomm, Jim serves as a 5GAA board member, ITS board member, ITS California Senior Advisor, and serves on the IEEE ITS Society Board of Governors. He established and is the immediate past chair of the SAE C-V2X Technical Committee. Jim also serves as an advisory council member to Mobility 21, Traffic 21, led by Carnegie Mellon University, and on the technical advisory board to the Center for Connected and Automated Transportation and the University of Michigan. Jim is also a member of the SAE WCX Technical Advisory Committee. Jim holds BS and MS degrees from UCLA and USC. Jim is an IEEE fellow. Jim, thank you for joining us today. Next, we have Dr. Punit Rathod. Dr. Punit Rathod has 17 plus years of wireless R&D experience. He has diverse experience of working as researcher in academia and industry, as well as entrepreneurship. He was co-founder of the wireless public safety communications startup in 2010 through 2014. He has been an active contributor to national and international standardization efforts of 3GPP, IEEE, and more recently ITUR, AWG, and TSDSI. He is a speaker in many workshops in matters concerning spectrum sharing industries, wireless standards, ecosystem, and industries. His recent work has been focused on spectrum and standardization as a senior lead technical standards with Qualcomm Standards and Industry Organization. Punit holds a PhD from IIT Bombay, Bachelor of Engineering, Mumbai University, and has many publications in peer-reviewed IEEE ACM conferences in the domain of wireless systems. He also has patents, India and US, in the wireless communication and networking domain. Jim, Punit, thank you so much again for your time. I will let you guys take it from here.
Pleasure to be here, Vikendra. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
And it's a pleasure. Let me share the screen before I start to talk too much. 1 second. So I'm presuming you can see the screen. If 1 second. Can you see the screen?
It looks like it's coming up right now. There we go. We can see it now.
Okay. All right. Wanted to you know, per the topic that you so eloquently introduced, we have a presentation to give you, and certainly we have left a lot of time for questions because there are a lot of questions. But let's talk about progress with C-V2X in India. Vikendra has introduced myself and Punit. Very clearly, Punit lives in India, and I am a visitor. But I visit Punit almost every week, and we work on this together along with other India-based stakeholders. and stakeholders all over the world because we want to see C-V2X happen. And I'll describe why in a moment with the agenda. So this will be like a sandwich. Punit will have a lot of the meat in the middle. But let me start with an introduction problem statement. Then I'll turn it over to where we are now in spectrum regulatory environment. And then where we will plan to be. And then I'll take over with the standards and use cases going forward. And then we'll have that aforementioned Q&A. So the problem statement is fairly clear. And before I get into this is off slide, but just to kind of give a scope, and many of you, I can tell by surnames, have been in India or India right now, is that there's something like 50 million cars in India with a 1.4 billion population. But importantly, there are well over 300 million powered two-wheelers. And with that, a legion of vulnerable road users. So the problem statement is rather significant in terms of safety in total. So these are stats, and you see the India stats come from MORTH, which is the Ministry of Road Transport and Highways. And you can see the crash fatalities annually in India, which are a very significant portion of the global crash fatality problem. And what's important is that 45% of the fatalities in India are on powered two-wheelers. And as time has progressed, this has come to home, and the safety culture in India is growing. So with 50 million cars, there are very modern cars that start to have ADAS and all sorts of interesting and important features to try to protect lives of drivers. And with V2X, as we all know, this audience starts to protect lives of all road users. So, and you can see the sobering stats. And again, India occupies a big portion of the sobering stats. Now, I've purposed this slide, but it brings things to point. And you can see that the numbers are a little bit different here. This is a different report, but this is the 2023 MORTH official crash fatality statistics in India. And one way to look at this is that the victim is on the row and the violator, basically who crashes into the victim, is on the columns. And for example, two-wheeler crashes claim over 27,000 lives a year in India. And you can see in total, the numbers are rather significant. And a lot of them are from two-wheeler crashes, but other vulnerable road users like pedestrians. So that starts to bias you into thinking about what the prospective use cases are of perhaps where we can apply as a community V2X or C-V2X in particular. Even the truck fatality rates are very high. If you look at the truck numbers, we're starting to talk about numbers of 33,000 fatalities a year that have trucks involved, and you look at 40,000 fatalities a year just with car or four-wheeler taxis, excluding trucks. So you can just see that those of you who are based in the U.S., this is just compound the problem, which is rather severe in the U.S. So it's very essential that we let out all stops and try to do every measure. Many of you are imbued in transportation, the 3 E's, enforcement, education, and engineering. Well, this is the engineering portion of the toolbox. And as you know, V2X is a very important tool in this engineering toolbox. Another way to look at this is to look at, again, and I think I've harped on this, but it's worth belaboring, is that about the number of victims killed while traveling in a power two-wheeler is very extensive. And many of these victims are in the prime of their lives. And many of the victims still are children. So, I just bring home the problem statement. We've all heard impassioned, and this is yet another one, but a very important one, about why we're doing V2X. And this is the impassioned narrative here. But just framing the problem statements, and you'll see that teased out in some of the use cases, but not all. And you can see where we as a community can try to progress toward trying to address very specifically these crash typologies. So with that, I'm going to turn the middle part over to Punit and talk about what we're doing heroically, I would say, as a community within India to move the spectrum and regulatory environment to enable C-V2X. So with that, Punit, I'm going to go by your cue to move the slides.
Thank you so much, Jim. So mostly before we go into the into the main set of slides, just wanted to lay down a perspective that these in the next few slides, the primary thing that we are going to cover is is what are the different stakeholders, who are them, where the discussions are happening, and also what is the current state of progress, and then obviously there are several additional things that the industry, the ecosystem, the automotive OEMs, they need to take that discussion further. Uh, so so there is significant uh, progress that has been made over the last few years. So that is something which we wish to cover and share with the community here. Uh, so next slide, please, Jim. Uh, so uh, so from the main stakeholder map in India, and by no means this is an exhaustive list, but this is more or less showing the key entities and players who are important. Uh, so from the government departments, like any other country, uh, ITS or V2X is one of those things which require uh, different ministries to be involved. Uh, Spectrum, because of the spectrum usage and communication being involved, the Department of Telecom is an obvious one. Also, the Road and Transport Ministry is another obvious ministry because of the direct end user of this technology. Uh, and in addition to both of these, there are a few other ministries which are key stakeholders in the discussion. One is Ministry of Electronics and Information Technology, um, and uh, and and as a special thing, because to explain in the specific context of India, uh, the the traffic or every individual state within India. So India has a federal structure. So there is a central government, and then there are different state governments. Uh, and because of the difference in the federal structure of India, um, the traffic within individual states is a state subject. So the Ministry of Home Affairs is then providing that bridge, because then to allow these different global rules for the country, but then there are also state-specific rules. And then Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs. This is also one of the ministries where uh, a lot of smart city projects are also getting hosted. So from that point of view, this is also one of the relevant ministries. Uh, but the two of the most primary important ones being telecom and road transport and highways. Uh, and having said that, there are a few additional government departments which are also very key stakeholders. One of them being National Highway Authority of India, and and a and a related subgroup is Indian Highway Management Company Limited, which is key stakeholder organization responsible for managing the highways, the tolling, the highway management, the ITS infrastructure along the highways, things of that nature. Um, and and then there is a Telecom Regulatory Authority of India, who is more like a telecom and spectrum regulator. Um, so as the different discussions progress, they may also be involved, depending on the nature of, say, spectrum regulation that gets developed further. In terms of standardization, Telecom Engineering Center is a technical arm which is hosted within the telecom department. This is also the body which is responsible for developing national standards in the telecom domain. So anything related to telecom equipment certification, mandatory testing of equipment, network equipment, and device side equipment that enter telecom networks. Uh, so the product certification requirements, all of those are hosted within TEC. TEC owns that. Uh, Bureau of Indian Standards. This is the other standardization body which is responsible for uh, uh, more or less the non-telecom part of standards within India. And then the third very relevant standardization group is ARAI, Automotive Research Association of India. They are responsible for a lot of the automotive standards work in India. And then finally there is Telecom Standards Development Society of India, TSDSI, which is one of the 3GPP organization partners. Uh, so they are the ones who are joint one of the seven OPs of 3GPP. So they transpose the 3GPP specifications and then provide it to TEC for adoption into national standards. TEC as their own role, they have key partnerships across the different standardization bodies in India because of their role of developing specifications and national standards. Uh, so they are more like a consultation body, and they adopt standards. So developing new standards, that kind of work happens more inside TSDSI, but TEC is the one which references and adopts standards and specifications developed in other groups. Uh, Industry stakeholders, uh, automotive OEMs, infrastructure vendors, traffic signal, uh, tolling, road operators. So these are the different stakeholders, which are key uh, uh, entities within the conversation. And then there are industry associations. Uh, from the automotive point of view, SIAM is the Indian Automotive Manufacturer Association, SMEV, the EV Association, Manufacturer Association, and then there are the two industry bodies, ITS India Forum and Cellular Operator Association of India. So this is, and I spent some time just to give a flavor that uh, the the stakeholder map and the active entities are quite broad, uh, providing getting involved in all the different discussions that are happening in India. So the journey of CV2X, a discussion started a few years ago with something significant starting in 2022, uh, where at that stage, the the National Frequency Allocation Plan of India, uh, they had allocated 50 megahertz for ITS spectrum, and more importantly DSRC since 2011. Uh, Similar to the conversations in the rest of the world, uh, the National Frequency Allocation Plan discussions in India in 2022 acknowledged that uh, the the spectrum and the technologies that are getting used are tending towards CV2X, and that is becoming more of a, that has more traction globally. So in 2022, the National Frequency Allocation Plan of India, with a footnote which was identifying this spectrum band and making it available for V2X in India, they made it technology neutral. So instead of making it available only for DSRC, this was the time when they acknowledged the fact that there is a trend and a clear trend towards CV2X. They made it technology neutral, so they removed DSRC and made it ITS/V2X. Having said that, there was still the discussion which was pending that there are while the National Frequency Allocation Plan makes the spectrum available, there were no rules. The transmit power rules, the emission mask, and a clear identification for harmonized technology in this band. So one more activity that the Wireless Planning Commission, which is sitting inside the Department of Telecom, they did was they established a, a sort of committee inside of WPC. They invited all the stakeholders, including the automotive OEM associations, SIAM, SMEV. They invited industry associations. They invited uh, a lot of different stakeholders, including the cellular operators. As part of the deliberations, uh, they did review all the different global trends, the different developments that were happening in different regions, and they developed a report which was internal to the department, and at least the conclusions were something uh, which were discussed in other public forums, which was very clear that they did discuss that the C-V2X is a harmonized technology uh, that may be relevant in the 5.9 gigahertz. So the committee did recommend that C-V2X is a technology that can be adopted in the 5.9 gigahertz. The report also recommended that there should be an interministerial task force to further deliberate on the use of this spectrum and the roadmap for adoption of ITS and V2X in India. Um so with this particular report, it started the discussion about the interministerial discussions on this topic. Uh, with to make the topic more broad, because then it was going beyond just the spectrum, but also about use cases, about standards, about the ITS stack, about how to ensure the security aspects, and that is what where TEC. The Telecom Engineering Center started developing a technical report. So this technical report got finalized towards the end of 2023. So within the Telecom Engineering Center, the chair of this particular working group, which was developing this report, was a senior DDG, Deputy Director General of TEC, within the IoT division. Uh, we from Qualcomm, I had the privilege to be the vice chair and the rapporteur for this work inside TEC. Um, and uh, and and this particular report was comprehensive in trying to document all the different technologies which were available for this ITS and V2X technology, the different spectrum related topics, the security related topics, and also on the stack. Uh, so this report was significant milestone in terms of making sure that uh, it is acknowledged that a harmonized standard, both on the radio layer and on the messaging layer, and on the security side, are extremely critical for the success of ITS deployment in India. And this particular report also further emphasized the need for interministerial coordination for progressing the work on ITS in India. So towards the end of 2024, the Ministry of Road and Transport then further established a task force. And very significantly, while the Ministry of Road and Transport was the one who established the task force, they made sure that the Telecom Engineering Center is the chair and the convener of this task force, truly making it clear that this will be a collaborative effort between the two important ministries, and also give the convener the the power to co-opt additional industry stakeholders, industry members, and make it a truly consultative committee. And this particular task force just completed one milestone in in late February on one of the significant topics, which was making clear the recommendations on spectrum use. The task force had three important mandates. One of them was how to utilize the 5.9 gigahertz band. The second important mandate was the different use cases and the standards which are relevant for this particular ITS and V2X in India. And then thirdly, the recommendation on the technical part, which is the technical transmit power limits and the delicensing of the band. So with these three mandates, the task force was starting in the discussion, and one of them on one of the topics they have concluded, which is on the spectrum emission part. So going into the next slide, I'll do a quick summary over the next few slides on both the TEC report and the task force outcome. Uh, so the TEC report, the hyperlink is at the bottom of the slide, which is the TEC report is now published with 4 recommendations. So the recommendations were grouped into 4 broad buckets. One of them was on the spectrum, which is to follow global best practices with license exempt spectrum, and also recommending the Wireless Planning Coordination Committee to develop the Gazette notification and the spectrum rules in the 5.9 gigahertz. On the standards related aspect, it also emphasized that there is a need for harmonized stack for the faster adoption of the V2X ecosystem. Uh, there was also a documented that there are at least a few options for the common ITS stack. It did document all the HC related ITS stack, and then it also documented a few of the SAE related stack options. So it did emphasize the importance of a harmonized common ITS stack in India. And then one of the recommendations was that TEC should start developing the testing and certification rules for OBU and RSU. From a general recommendation, it was emphasizing the need of interministerial coordination and also acknowledging that V2X is becoming an important radio technology in different global NCAP rules, and emphasize that Bharat NCAP, which was recently developed, to consider adding V2X as one of the technologies in the future revision of NCAP in India. And finally, on the security part, it emphasized the relevance of the need of a PKI framework to authenticate and secure the messages, identify the source and trustworthiness of the messages in the communication, and also the cybersecurity and functional safety regulations that are prevalent. Um, and in the next slide uh, is is the technical rules which emerged out of the interministerial task force. And because the interministerial task force acknowledged the discussions that happened both in the WPC committee and in the TEC report, and all the ongoing discussions in the rest of the world. So one of the clear acknowledgement that one of the clear recommendations was that it acknowledged 3GPP CV2X is one of the technologies that is most relevant to be able to use the 5.9 gigahertz band. It established by consensus the rules which could be utilized for the formal Gazette notification in India, both for the transmit power and out-of-band emission mask. These are largely derived from the 3GPP release 14 and beyond standards. So for the OBU and RSU, up to 4 watts of radiated power, and for the out-of-band emission, the out-of-band emission mask is again following the 3GPP RAN4 specifications. So these are now uh, under consideration. So that is why I'm using the word under consideration, because these are not yet published in an official gazette of the government. So that is why it is. I'm just giving this as a disclaimer that it is still under consideration, but there's not much debate about using these limits. Going further, this is one additional discussion that is happening within India. So this is going a little beyond V2X per se, but one of the discussions that is happening in India is about utilizing GNSS tolling, which is the current method of tolling in India is using RFID. So there is a tag on the dashboard of the car, and then when the car crosses the toll barrier, the RFID tag is read, and then there's a digital wallet. If there is balance in the wallet, then the gate allows the vehicle to move forward. Uh, in an existing specification, there was a spec which was developed in India for the purpose of ensuring safety of passengers in public transport, mainly taxi cabs and buses. And this particular specification was developed for a very different purpose, to because the whole purpose was safety of passengers in taxi cabs. So if you are ever visiting India, or if you have visited India and you have took public transport, you would have noticed that there is a button, an SOS panic button, accessible to the passengers. So this is the specification developed in 2016, which is enabling or mandating these SOS buttons in public transport vehicles. So the specification at that point of time when it was developed, it was utilizing GNSS plus basic 2G GPRS. The specification got updated in 2017, making it possible to utilize more recent technology developments, updating the test procedures, and also adding LTE. And then this spec was further updated in an Amendment 2 in 2018 to further expand the scope and make it also possible for vehicle location tracking, for industrial usages, logistics, and others. And now there is an ongoing discussion for a further amendment to make it possible to utilize this for tolling. So the vehicle location tracking was already in place, and then the same category or class of devices with few additional additions could then get utilized for the purpose of tolling. Given the history and the nature of this spec, it was mostly utilizing GNSS signal and then reporting the location of the vehicle on a live basis to a central cloud server using one of the cellular technologies. So the primary target of this third amendment is commercial vehicles, but there is an acknowledgement that there are privacy concerns that need to be addressed in future for passenger vehicles. And the reason for me bringing up this topic in the C-V2X slide is that there are at least discussions, or C-V2X has been brought up in the context of passenger vehicles. This is not something which is an active discussion, but this is one of the discussions that is happening. And then with that, I'll hand the floor back to Jim for the rest of the discussion. Thanks.
Thank you, Punit. So just to calibrate where we are, so some people, and there are, we can see linkages between having GNSS as a mandate and V2X. But even before then, the vector you see is it takes a long time to formulate, but there's inertia to point to what Punit referred to as publication in the India Gazette. So those of you who are imbued in the US system, that's roughly akin to a final rule, or put in the report order, because the technical parameters which Punit laid out would be there. But as you know, that's necessary but not sufficient. So on a parallel track, and Punit invoked some acronyms, which I'll redefine, is that the MORTH, the Ministry of Road Transport and Highway, working with TEC, and then getting input from the stakeholder community, which is the OEMs and others. The OEMs are SIAM. So those are the three India-based OEMs. So for everyone, that's Mahindra, Maruti, and Tata, the major three OEMs for vehicles, who have been working assiduously in parallel to imagine what could happen. So, but there are some disconnects that are still being connected. So A is the publication of the Gazette, as aforementioned, but another would be the standards. I noticed that Jason Ellis asked a question about security. So yes, there is choice here. So, if there's a fork in the road, take it, as they say. So the choice is, and this is obvious to all of you, but this is an active discussion within India. And, one can argue that the first mover OEM with this vacuum will define what the stack could be. Another argument is that maybe there needs to be a discussion in that, but there is a need for one pan-India stack, and you all know this, particularly this group. And here are the choices, and here are some of the considerations, which I can read a little bit, but many of you know, particularly the SAE IEEE wave stack. But the India stack, for reasons that, the ETSI TCITS defined stack is something that we should all be cognizant of, because this could very well be the case in India. There are proponents of this. My company is neutral. We just want to see a common stack, but others have points of view. And you can see basically the comparison in different dimensions. So the Metz set defined by the ETSI Common Dictionary is relatively similar to 2735. Obviously, there are differences, but structurally, we're talking about similarity. And the security services is a profile. I think this answers Jason Zellis's question about with IEEE 16902, but certainly it could be one or the other, but they're roughly the same. And within there is a PKI root of trust. Now, there's a single signer in the European concept, with pluses and minuses, but the signer rollover is fragile with just one signer in the way that you can reach if you have certificate rollover. In the US, or as defined not strictly by the SAE IEEE wave stack, unless you think about IEEE 692.1, there are multiple signers with the concept of a certificate trust list, which is in the SCMS manager. So the different ways of doing it. What's germane also is the spectrum use. So you can have an ETSI, a 10 megahertz release 1 or a 20 megahertz release 2. And just recently, CEPT in Europe, and why it's relevant, again, India looks very closely at Europe for standards, is a 20 megahertz. Now, they're not interoperable for obvious reasons, but 10 megahertz limits message traffic. So obviously, when where my company's at, we prefer the wider channels in all regions. So a preference would be common stack, the wider channels. And this group, more than almost any other group, understands the standards that constitute how one does interoperability in the 20 megahertz channel that is available most commonly in the US. And what's really important to this group is where are we in terms of conformance assessment? So here is an opportunity for Omniair, potentially, but the opportunity may be that the clothes that Omniair wears are ETSI clothes. And I know you haven't tried that on yet, but this is a discussion point right now, and a pretty important one to resolve, and one that Punit and others, and I know others are some of the stakeholders who I see have gotten up early in India and are listening to this. So maybe this slide, which you can read as I talk about something else. What I really wanted to do was to get permission from an OEM. So the OEMs, as mentioned, are working on this to describe the use cases they're mentioning. The only thing I can do is to give strong hints at the upfront, when I talked about the crash problem in India, which is rather significant and rather broad, and includes two-wheelers. So those are some of the very specific use cases. But what I can talk about publicly is what was done very recently, and actually Danlaw figures in importantly, Qualcomm figures in to some extent, and very much so the ITS India Forum, which Punit mentioned as an industry group that's very significant in moving this forward, in addition to the entities that do standardization. So maybe I can take a little segue here. My unabashed recommendation to Jason Conley, who I know is on, is to establish a relationship with ITS India Forum, which comprised of basically the coalition, the willing, we're trying to make this happen in India. And several Omniair members are members of ITS India Forum. So again, this is a singular use case. Actually, it is multiple because it involves a 10 intersection corridor with 4 RSU-equipped intersections. Several things that I note about this is that it's a dense urban area with a built environment. So that means that you have a multipath problem, both in terms of accessing the sky view and in terms of the side link or direct communication. The equipment that you see is on a surrogate ambulance by happenstance, a Mahindra vehicle. And then RSU from Danlaw and Arcadis/CDAC. So CDAC is one of the entities I believe that Punit has mentioned, traffic signal controller. So there are various standards. We've been talking about over-the-air standards and the types of standards that Omniair is used to certifying. There's also a traffic signal controller set of standards that are a little bit you have to build an adapter most likely. There are some very different standards there. This would be a wave stack at 20 megahertz, but note that's still not the official stack, but it's been done in this particular corridor project. And you can see the two applications, which make sense, right, when you do signalized intersections. So some practical considerations in users. So those of you who are really into SAE standards know there's a work in progress called 3258, which actually I'm the chair of the task force, which is trying to specify if you do RTMS or RTK correction, this is how you would do it. Lane level positioning is difficult in much of India for reasons of that built environment. And remember that in India, you have your own India-specific constellation in addition to the others that you see. It's very important to consider NAV-IC. And because of that built environment, the poor GPS, C-V2X coverage, all the problems that you would expect in a built environment, plus the very special India traffic conditions. And again, no unified SCMS, which is something that the stakeholders and Punit, perhaps in question and answers, can talk about. And importantly, and again, no consensus on the stack. And finally, this idea of the VRU problem, I just kind of illustrated, if you consider two-wheelers apart, and you should, as part of the VRU problem. Very difficult to address, and there's still lack of cameras, a lack of infrastructure. So what I'm saying is that even though C-V2X deployment is promising, OEMs are really, really cognizant of it, and some are very, very far forward and leaning forward into getting this done. There's still that infrastructure problem that exists. Not a problem, but the fact that the infrastructure owner-operator is not in a position right now to make ubiquitous deployment of infrastructure. That being said, as you know, in many of these use cases, if you start to talk about corridors, you're in good stead. And what is not shown here, because again, I can only use one example, is that there is an explosion of tollways built in India. You saw Punit talk about GNSS tolling, or heard him talk about GNSS tolling. And often when you go to India, those of you who live there know that often they're talked about in the same breath. So you can start to see the emergence of an idea that maybe, even though limited access roads are our safest roads, that there is a chance for infrastructure to be built there as well as where the problem resides. So this is the use case, has been deployed, a use case. So with that, again, I wish I had more on that, but we're at the point now and this is good news really, that the OEMs are holding their plans for C-V2X very close to the chest. So couldn't get permission to show you some very interesting use cases that some OEMs are considering. So with that, I know that we have about 15 minutes left, and Bhrakendra, chime in anytime you want, but we do have a few questions in the Q&A, and happy to address those.
Yes, I do see we have quite a few questions. So let's start. I'm going to go back to some of the answered ones. So the first question up here was if you all can get a copy of the presentation. Yes, I will make sure that you have that copy once it's provided to us. The next says every country has their own structure to control traffic signal between police department and traffic department. In UAE, traffic signal has been managed by traffic department in Korea. Traffic signal by traffic department wrote in traffic device. What about India? Now, I see that, Punit, you had answered that. You said in-city state traffic police department is the responsible entity in India. Do you want to expand on that at all?
Yes, I'll just add a note that this is not, so when I say the traffic police department, this is not a global entity for the entire country. So every city have their own traffic police department, and that is the entity that will be responsible. So it's not a global answer for the entire country, but every city or state may have their own traffic police department. That's the context.
Okay. So next we have Jason Ellis. Thank you for asking. For security, will this be ETSI or IEEE 1609.2.1 based? And I know, Jim, you said you'd like to answer this live.
Well, I did. Well, actually, I think I did it as a course of the discussion.
Okay.
So, in fact, so indeterminate, but necessary to have one or the other. Got it.
Next, we have to deploy OBU and RSU in India. Any certification required for device as FCC or CE or specific regulation at India? I mean, FCC or CE could be minimal entry certification to apply V2X device, or need to apply specific certification required.
Go for it,
Yeah.
Punit.
Yes. I'll take it. So at least in India, maybe I'll just use a parallel so that it will be easier. Uh, if we utilize the example of wireless LAN devices, so there is now a new mechanism which is mandatory testing and certification of equipment, which is established under TEC. So the test procedures are largely similar to what an FCC or CE does, but now starting very recently, the TEC MTCTE certification has been required. Uh, Having said that, for obtaining the type approval, it is still under a self-certification basis. So the FCC and CE certification test procedures, they would still be allowed, but this is still a developing discussion, and MTCTE could very well become like a mandate that it may need India specific MTCTE certification. Yeah.
I see another question. This is back to the question on the 1609.2.1. It says, any comments on time frame, spectrum finalization? When do standards need to be finalized by? Time frame for possible NCAP inclusion or hasn't yet started?
I'm going to point out, Kendra, that 69.2.1 or security services fits in there, but this is broader than that, I believe, my interpretation. This is for the whole kit and caboodle, the whole package. Punit has some specifics, but let me just answer is that you saw the long journey that started with all that's the process. And we're seeing the light at the end of the tunnel. And if you excuse the metaphor, running to the light as quick as possible. And that takes a lot of people to run together, right? It's like you're tied together. And so it's been a masterful journey orchestrated by this so-called coalition of the willing. But many of those hoops, Punit, have been jumped through. But Punit, to the extent you feel comfortable, why don't you give us a prediction?
Yes. So one of the things maybe I can discuss, and by no means I want to make it a very comprehensive and a definitive answer, because it will not be. But one of the things, if we look at spectrum licensing, uh, making spectrum available for free, this is something which is a very sensitive and tricky topic, especially in India. Uh, uh, and when we are talking about this spectrum, particularly, this is about safety of life, reducing road fatalities. Uh, so obviously the ask from the industry and ecosystem is to make it available for free, but not make it available in a de-licensed sense, but make it available for this specific use case. Uh, and when we are able to establish the global examples for the OBU, it is very clear. There are no global examples for making any sort of charging. It is practically license exempt everywhere. But for the RSU, there are several examples, including FCC, and in Canada, in many of the global regulations which are documented, and there are references. So there is some amount of license involved. The moment there is a licensing involved, and that is one of the entities which I mentioned in one of the slides, TRAI, that the moment we bring the topic of licensing and even a certain amount of money that can be associated with the spectrum, irrespective of the technical rules. But the moment money gets involved, the Telecom Regulatory Authority of India will have to have a public consultation. And the outcome of the consultation will become a recommendation to the telecom department to then finalize that money part. So while the spectrum technical rules may get published, but if there is this element of money being charged for the RSU, this could add one more time consuming activity to the whole discussion. There are other things like NCAP. NCAP version 2 discussions have started. This is currently in a small select group which is within the ministry. It will start becoming more open and consultative in due course of time. But this is the time frame for Bharat NCAP version 2, based on the public discussions, is 2027.
But just to separate, NCAP is different than getting C-V2X on the road. And Punit, once that licensing question is answered, is being asked and addressed now, right? It should be without putting a date to a relatively short order, right? That there's just the publication in the Gazette, which is finally the springboard for deployment.
Yeah.
We have a few more questions. So I see, and you just tell me if this has already been answered. I'm just going to read through the questions and make sure we're covering them. So how can we mitigate the packet loss while sending the messages through V2X?
I can do that simply, but this is not an India problem.
Okay.
And I'm going to start with a single word answer is Omnia. But let's just dive deeper in that, right? Receiver sensitivity and emitted power or radiated power are two ways to accompany that, right? We need more power. And then we need to understand the performance and interoperability of that. So entities like Omnia for conformance assessment or certification are really essential. But that's just mainly a physics and engineering problem that again is every region. So I'm going to suggest in my hypothesis, and I know it's a big leap to cross several oceans, but Omnia in India would be pretty awesome.
That would be pretty awesome. I agree. I know Jason would agree as well. Okay, so next we have, who are the major active SCMS vendors in India?
I think this may be more of a ecosystem thing, but I don't know. Maybe Jim, you have something.
So I don't know, but there are PKI systems in India, right, Punit, that are government owned, government run, and the issue, and perhaps this dodges the question. I'm sorry, and there's probably opportunity, which just couldn't talk about generically, but the issue is that, and as you know, in deployments, if each OEM has an SCMS or PKI system, they deploy it, and then the whole idea of how do you get common trust is TBD. So there are some more fundamental questions that have to be addressed in short order when we're on the way. But frankly, I don't. So we confess, neither Punit and I know exactly who the SCMS competitors are in India.
Okay. Next we have, can academic professionals be the part of task force on ITS India? Oh no, I guess it must say, can they be a part of the task force, I think is the correct wording.
Yes, so I think I did mention so that the task force has a convener who is from TEC. So the convener does co-opt professionals who are expert in the domain from time to time. So the convener does co-opt. Yes.
Okay, and next I have, then I could understand for V2X device, the new regulation is being structured now, right? So I think they're asking if it's been structured now.
Yeah.
In the reverse. Perfect. Okay, so next we have, what are the opportunities in this V2X domain for engineers?
I say they're manifold, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know who answered, but it's a great question. You're amongst friendly folks, many of whom, not all, are engineers, because it is inherently what engineers do. We use technology to address society's problems. So yes, there are very many. It's quite technical, and whoever asked it, I advise you to get your learned degrees and think about this field.
And it says, and through V2X, are they low latency messages?
The answer is absolutely, but let me embellish that. In this audience, many of us know this, is that latency is not the only key performance indicator. There are others, but basically what you want to have is the packet to arrive on time, packets, with enough reception rate that you can have the application protocol work well. But part of that is an assured latency. Low latency is very subjective, but you need to, and this is again what Omnia members are very expert in.
Okay, and it looks like we have one last question. So if there's anything else, drop it in while we're answering this last question. So it says, since the largest number of road incidents involve two-wheelers, is there awareness within those manufacturers of C-V2X technology as a possible solution? If not, are there any efforts being made to build that awareness so it can be factored into their roadmaps? Or would it ultimately have to be legislated into the safety regulations?
I can't talk about the regulations, but the answer to the first one is yes, there is considerable awareness. And many of you know the India market, and it's as I've explained, it's becoming more safety aware, but it's very price conscious. But there's huge opportunity, and the way to drive price down is to have many vendors and to have interoperability. So yes, there is, but there have to be the right solution. And we and other stakeholders fully understand that, and part of the dialogue are the two-wheeler manufacturers.
All right. Well, I do not see any further questions. How do you guys feel about wrapping up? That was a lot of information. I so appreciate your time today.
It was our pleasure.
Before I let you guys go, I do want to pop up on the screen here. We've got Plugfest coming up, so I'd love to share our slide. Let's see if I can get this on here. Hopefully you all can see my Plugfest slide. This is coming up pretty quickly. So we have May 7th through the 9th is our OmniAir Florida Plugfest. Tagging along with that is the interoperability testing May 12th through 16th. So for those of you who don't know, OmniAir Plugfest is a premier testing event for connected vehicle and infrastructure technologies where vendors test their C-V2X equipment for interoperability and industry standards of compliance. This week-long event will bring together automotive OEMs, device manufacturers, test laboratories, and experts from around the world to ensure readiness for deployment. So we've got that coming up very quickly. You've got the link here as a clickable. I did also drop that into the chat for you all. So if you guys will have any questions, feel free to message me directly. This link for the replay will be going out to everyone who registered. So if anybody needs that, it's going to be going out by end of day tomorrow. Jim, Punit, thank you. I know you guys are on opposite ends of the spectrum as far as time. Punit, thank you for getting up super early. Jim, thank you for staying up super late. And with that, we'll say farewell. We'll talk to you guys soon.
Thank you
Have a
all.
great night and have a great morning.
Thank you.
Bye.